I don't think I'll ever forget the exact moment everything shifted. Not the way people say my life changed that day, but the kind of shift where the things you believed in, family, trust, your own sense of worth, start unraveling all at once. It was my brother's voice that broke the silence first, loud and bitter, sharp enough to sting even though I'd heard it 1,000 times before. "You're the reason this family is falling apart," he shouted, face flushed and eyes wild. And then came the real gut punch. My dad, standing across from me with his arms crossed like I was some stranger who'd wandered in uninvited, muttering low but clear, "We'd all be better off without you." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just walked out. The door didn't slam. I made sure of that. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. But this morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls. All from the hospital. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back and tell you how we got here. I'm Connor. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the background character in my own family. Not the golden child. Not the favorite. Just there. Existing quietly, doing the right thing, keeping my head down. I was the kid who got straight B's and never asked for much. The one who didn't break things, didn't scream at the dinner table, didn't crash the car or sneak out to parties. I figured that would be enough. It wasn't. My older brother, Mason, is the golden one. He always has been. He's 28, and he walks through life like it owes him something. My parents, especially my dad, see him as this unstoppable force, the one who's going to take the family name further, whatever that means. Mason played varsity football, even though he sat on the bench most of the time, and that alone earned him years of praise. Meanwhile, I was quietly teaching myself how to build websites, edit videos, even code a little. I landed my first freelance gig when I was 17. No one said anything. Mom used to say I was the quiet achiever, but even that stopped once Mason dropped out of college and suddenly decided he wanted to start a business. They called him brave for it. Dad co-signed the loan. When I tried to launch my own side hustle, an actual LLC with a few decent clients, Dad told me to wait until I had real experience. I moved out as soon as I could afford it. I wasn't running away, not really. I just needed space. I still came back for birthdays, for holidays, for the stuff that mattered. Even when it felt awkward. Even when Mason found new ways to poke at me, call me the intern, laugh at my clothes, ask if I was still playing YouTube for money. It wasn't just him, though. My parents never stepped in. They let it slide, always. This year, things started getting worse. I don't know why exactly. Maybe it was the tension building. Maybe something snapped in Mason, or maybe I just stopped brushing things off. It started with little things. I'd show up at the house and find my seat at the table taken. No one would ask if I wanted coffee or help with dishes. If Mason needed something, like help moving a couch or setting up his new computer, I was suddenly important again. Then I'd go back to being invisible. The tipping point started a few weeks ago. It was Dad's birthday. Big backyard party, steaks on the grill, the usual beer and bravado routine. I showed up with a gift I'd actually thought through. Custom-engraved cufflinks with his initials and a small quote from his favorite author. I figured, maybe this time, it'd register. Maybe he'd see that I cared in my own way. But when he opened it, all he said was, "Huh, that's different," before setting them down on the table and moving on. Meanwhile, Mason rolled up 30 minutes late with a box of Cuban cigars and got a standing ovation. I was used to that by now, but what stung worse was what happened after. I was helping Mom bring out dessert when Mason started telling some story about how I cried in gym class back in middle school. Total lie. Everyone laughed, including my parents. No one looked at me. I stood there holding a tray of lemon squares like an idiot, face hot, jaw clenched. When I finally set them down, Dad just smirked and said, "You always were sensitive, Connor." After that night, I decided to put some distance between us. I ignored a few texts, skipped one of the Sunday dinners. I needed air. I needed perspective. But that only made things worse. 2 days ago, Mom called to guilt trip me. She asked if I'd forgotten I was part of the family. Said Mason was worried about me, which was laughable. When I didn't bite, she asked me to at least come by for dinner Friday night. Just the four of us. "It'll be nice to catch up," she said. Reset. Against my better judgment, I said yes. I figured maybe they missed me. Maybe it would be different. It wasn't. Dinner was tense from the start. The food was fine. Mom always made a solid roast, but no one was really talking. Mason was on his phone half the time, and Dad just kept sipping his beer, eyes flicking between us like he was waiting for a show to start. I tried to keep things light, asked about Mom's garden, brought up a project I was working on. Blank stares. Grunts. Mason said, "Sounds like a lot of time to waste on something no one's ever gonna see." I told him, calmly, that I actually had a few clients who liked my work, that I'd built a pretty steady income and was even thinking of renting a bigger place next year. That's when Dad laughed and said, "So you finally gonna get a real job?" Something broke in me then. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet snap. I put down my fork, pushed my plate forward, and said, "Why do you even invite me if everything I do is just a joke to you?" That's when Mason leaned in, voice rising. "Because you need to hear the truth for once. You're the reason this family's falling apart." His voice echoed in the dining room. Mom looked down at her plate. Dad didn't miss a beat. He nodded slowly, then said, "He's right. We'd all be better off without you." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out. It was dark when I got back to my apartment. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying their words, wondering how we got here, wondering how I ever believed I was part of that family. I ignored every call and text that came in that night. Then came this morning. I woke up to 12 missed calls, all from the hospital. And now, I don't know whether to pick up the phone or let them find out what it feels like when I'm the one who walks away. I stared at my phone for a long time. Just stared. 12 missed calls, all from the hospital. No names, just the same generic caller ID repeating over and over, like an alarm I'd slept through. I didn't feel fear at first, just confusion. Dull confusion, the kind you get when your body wakes up before your mind does. I rolled out of bed, legs heavy, head still replaying the night before. Mason's voice echoing, Dad's words like frost in my chest. Then came the texts. From Mom. One after the other. "Connor, please call me. Something's happened. It's your dad." That one hit different. I didn't respond. Not right away. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the sunlight creeping in through the blinds like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because the truth is, I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel anything. That's when I realized just how far they'd pushed me. I'd always assumed that no matter how bad things got, some primal part of me would still care, still need them. But in that moment, staring at my phone, all I felt was cold distance. Like I was watching a stranger's emergency unfold through someone else's screen. Eventually, I called. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know. A nurse answered. Polite, professional, detached. She said my dad had been brought in with chest pain. Possible heart attack. Stable now, but under observation. They were trying to reach family members in case things changed. I thanked her. Hung up. And still, no part of me moved to rush over. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the weight of everything settle, letting the irony bloom. "We'd all be better off without you," he'd said. Less than 12 hours later, his heart gave out mid-sleep. I don't say that with bitterness, just observation. Like the universe had been listening. An hour later, another call. This time it was Mason. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short, clipped, almost robotic. "You need to come. Dad's asking for you." That was new. Dad never asked for me. Not once in my adult life had he made it clear he wanted me around. Not when I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not when I got my first big client and emailed him a video I was proud of. But now, when he's scared and wired to a monitor, now he remembers my name. I didn't go. Not that day. Instead, I cleaned my apartment. Scrubbed the kitchen counters, vacuumed under the couch, organized the cables behind my desk. I needed control over something. Needed to ground myself in a space where I wasn't invisible. By evening, Mason had called 3 more times. Mom twice. I didn't answer any of them. I turned my phone off and went for a walk. Cold wind, empty streets, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. I thought about how many years I'd spent bending myself to fit into a mold they never made room for. How many holidays I'd shown up out of guilt, only to leave feeling smaller than when I came in. I thought about the tray of lemon squares I'd held like a peace offering. The laughter. The look on Dad's face when he said it. "We'd all be better off without you." I don't know when it became normal for me to accept so little. The next morning, I caved and went to the hospital. Not because I forgave him. Not because I missed them. But because I needed to see him. See the man who thought cutting me down made him taller. I walked into that sterile white room expecting to feel something. Rage. Sadness. Relief. But all I saw was a tired man, hooked up to machines, eyes closed. the lines around his mouth tighter than I remembered. Mom was sitting beside him, mascara smudged, hands clenched together like a prayer gone unanswered. Mason stood in the corner, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. When I walked in, they both looked up. Mom spoke first. "Connor, thank you for coming." Mason didn't say a word, just nodded, barely. I didn't sit down. I stood there, near the door, heart steady. After a long silence, Dad opened his eyes. Groggy, unfocused. Then they landed on me. "Connor," he croaked, voice thin like smoke. "You came." I waited for something. An apology. A hint of regret. But all he said next was, "I didn't mean what I said." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the thing about a lifetime of being second best is that you start recognizing hollow words before they hit the floor. "I think you did," I said quietly. "You just didn't think it would echo back." He flinched at that. Just slightly. But he didn't deny it. Mom jumped in. "He wasn't thinking clearly, Connor. He was upset. Tired. You know how he gets when." "I know exactly how he gets," I interrupted. "I've known since I was 10. No one spoke after that. The heart monitor kept beeping, steady and slow. I stayed 5 more minutes, maybe 6. Then I turned and left. That should have been the end of it. Me walking out again, this time for good. But that night, something changed. It was late when I got home. Nearly midnight. I'd barely kicked off my shoes when I got a text from my cousin Sarah. We're not super close, but she's one of the few relatives who's always treated me like a full human being, not just Mason's awkward shadow. The text just said, "Hey, wanted to check on you. Heard what Mason did." "That's messed up." I blinked. "Reread it." "What Mason did?" I replied. "What do you mean?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then came the bomb. "You didn't hear? He told people you refused to come to the hospital unless Dad promised to put you in the will." My stomach dropped. I called her immediately. She picked up fast, voice hushed but urgent. "I was at Aunt Linda's," she said. "Mason was there, telling everyone you were blackmailing your way back into the family. He made it sound like you threatened them. Said you were only visiting Dad for money." I couldn't breathe. Not because I was shocked that Mason lied, but because of how easily everyone believed it. I hadn't said a word about money. I didn't even want anything from them. But Mason knew exactly how to twist the knife. He knew I wasn't there to defend myself. He knew how to take my silence and smear it into a motive. Sarah kept talking. "He said you've always been jealous, that you resented him for being successful." I laughed bitterly. "Successful? He's living off loans Dad co-signed. I have a business. Clients. I pay my own bills." "I know," she said. "But you know how it is. They all eat up whatever Mason says. He's the good one. Always has been." My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but fury. A slow, cold kind of fury. The kind that creeps into your spine and whispers, "Enough is enough." That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my old hard drive, the one I hadn't touched in months, and started organizing files. Contracts. Invoices. Screenshots. Video backups. Every bit of proof I had that I built everything on my own, without help, without handouts. And I started documenting. Not for them. Not even for Sarah. But for me. I wanted the truth lined up, airtight. I didn't know yet how I'd use it. But I knew one thing. Mason had drawn a line in the sand. He wasn't just trying to undermine me. He was trying to erase me. Rewrite the story so I'd be the leech, the manipulator, the outsider clawing his way back in. He didn't realize I'd been documenting things for years. Old texts, passive-aggressive emails, voice memos from phone calls I'd recorded when I suspected he'd twist my words. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. Because people like Mason, they don't stop unless someone makes them. By sunrise, I had everything sorted. But the real twist came that afternoon. I got another call from the hospital. Not about Dad. This time it was the billing department. "Hi, is this Connor Reynolds?" the voice asked. "Yes. This is just a courtesy call regarding the card you provided for your father's procedure. We wanted to confirm the charges before processing." My mind blanked. I didn't provide a card. The woman paused. "It's listed under your name. Same address as the one we have on file for the emergency contact." I asked her to read it out. It was my old address, the one I used to live at before Mason moved in after I left. My jaw clenched. "Don't process anything," I said. "That card is not authorized." I hung up. And I knew. He used my name. My identity. To pay for Dad's hospital bills. Probably to look like a hero. Maybe even to make me look guilty if it came out later. I sat there, heart pounding, as the pieces fell into place. The lie about the will, the smear campaign, the fraudulent charge. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war. And Mason had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I don't remember the exact moment I hit rock bottom. It wasn't a dramatic collapse, no shouting, no tears. It was more like a slow, silent sinking. Like waking up underwater, realizing you'd been drowning for a while, and wondering if it was even worth swimming anymore. After that call from the hospital billing department, I didn't yell. I didn't punch a wall. I just sat there in my chair, staring at nothing, as the weight of it all settled in. Mason had used my name, my identity, to cover a hospital bill, and he'd done it so casually, like it was just another tool in his arsenal. Another story he'd twist later, maybe to say I offered to pay, or that I'd tried to buy my way back into the family. After all, he was already planting those seeds, wasn't he? The betrayal hit different this time. This wasn't just words or cold shoulders over dinner. This was calculated, personal, a theft of both money and narrative. And it hurt, not because I needed their approval anymore. I was done chasing that, but because it confirmed something I tried so hard not to believe. They didn't just fail to see me. They chose not to. I called the hospital back, told them the charge was unauthorized. They were polite but unhelpful, said I'd have to file a fraud claim with my bank, and that they couldn't remove the card unless someone else took financial responsibility. I asked who added my card in the first place. They said it had been provided during intake, and the form was signed by a Connor Reynolds. I asked for a copy. They said they'd send it by mail. I already knew what it would show. Mason's handwriting, or maybe some sloppy attempt at copying mine. I could see it so clearly in my head. But somehow, seeing it wasn't what scared me. What scared me was how normal this all felt. Like I was already used to being violated by my own family. That night, I walked. Just walked. No destination. My legs just moved, block after block, as if trying to outrun the thoughts in my head. The sky was overcast, the streetlights buzzed, and every breath felt like glass. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I felt hollow. Absolutely gutted. The next few days passed in a fog. I didn't work. I didn't sleep. I ignored texts, ignored calls. Mason had messaged once, some smug line like, "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. You're welcome." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to say something I wouldn't regret. Mom texted too. Said they were worried about me. Said Dad was home now, recovering. That we should put things behind us and come together. I almost laughed when I read that. Come together. Like we were some sitcom family having a disagreement over Thanksgiving turkey, not a broken house held together by manipulation and selective memory. Then came the mail. The intake form from the hospital. The signature wasn't even close to mine. It was laughable, big, loopy letters trying to mimic my writing, but full of inconsistencies. Sloppy, rushed, obvious. Mason didn't even try to hide it. He thought I'd roll over. He always did. That was the moment something shifted. Not rage, not revenge, but resolve. I opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Truth, and I started building. Every email, every voicemail, every screenshot of Mason's texts, every receipt showing my real address, my actual bank info, my business activity. I pulled copies of my LLC filings, dated years ago, proof that I wasn't freeloading or jealous or still figuring things out. I found photos, old ones, from family dinners where Mason would crop me out before posting them online, from parties where I was the one behind the camera, never in front of it. And I started writing. Not a Reddit post, not a letter, but my story. For the first time in my life, I stopped editing myself for them. Stopped shrinking to fit into the version of me that made them comfortable. I wrote down everything. The comments, the lies, the quiet betrayals, the gaslighting. I didn't plan to share it yet. I just needed to see it, to hold it, to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I had lived through it, and survived. Somewhere in the middle of that process, I started to remember who I was before all this. Before Mason's voice became the one that rewrote every room we entered. Before Dad's silence swallowed every opportunity to speak up. I remembered being proud of myself when I landed my first client, when I finished a 3-month video project that helped a small business triple their traffic. I remembered waking up excited to work, not drained from carrying invisible wounds. I reached out to an old client, one I'd helped rebrand their company last year. We hadn't spoken in months. I asked if they needed any video work done. They said yes, And within a day, I was back in the zone, editing clips, choosing music, syncing transitions. My mind felt clear for the first time in weeks. I worked late into the night. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. One gig turned into two. Then a referral came in. Then another. I didn't advertise. I didn't post anything online. But something had shifted. The more I focused on myself, on building rather than reacting, the more momentum I gathered. And the more I worked, the more I realized how much I'd let my family shrink me. How often I'd second-guessed myself, worried that I was being too sensitive or making things about me. But the truth was, they made it about me when it was convenient. When they needed someone to blame. Or when they needed someone to pay the bill. I started going to the gym again. Nothing fancy, just a few light sessions a week, getting my body moving. I changed my diet. Started sleeping better. I cleared out my apartment, donated old clothes, rearranged furniture, threw out junk I didn't even remember owning. It felt symbolic. Like shedding skin. I even booked a weekend trip. Just me. A small cabin upstate. No Wi-Fi, no noise. I brought books, not screens. I hiked. I journaled. I sat in silence and listened to the wind. And somewhere out there, surrounded by trees and sky, I realized something important. I don't need them. Not their validation. Not their permission. Not even their love. At least, not the kind they're capable of giving. What I needed was me. My voice. My story. My strength. When I came back from that trip, I had clarity. Mason wasn't just a bully. He was a coward in a loud costume. A fragile ego dressed in bravado. And Dad, he wasn't a patriarch. He was a man who picked favorites and called it discipline. And Mom, she wasn't innocent. Her silence was a choice. Her refusal to stand up for me had consequences, whether she admitted it or not. But I wasn't going to chase an apology anymore. I was going to show them who they'd tried to erase. It started small. I updated my portfolio, rebranded my website, polished my client testimonials, added new services. Then I launched a YouTube channel, not for fame, just as a creative outlet. Tutorials, breakdowns of editing techniques, behind-the-scenes project commentary. Within a week, a few videos started picking up traction. Comments trickled in, then more. One video crossed 10,000 views, then 50,000. Emails followed. New clients. Collaborations. I was building something real. Something mine. And here's the thing. I didn't tell anyone. Not family. Not even Sarah. I wanted this to grow in silence, free from their reach, untouched by their narratives. But the universe has a funny way of delivering news. One night, about a month after that hospital incident, I got another message. From Mason. Short. Smug. Heard you're doing YouTube now. Cute. No congratulations. No curiosity. Just condescension. But here's what he didn't know. I'd trademarked my brand. I'd secured contracts. I'd filed paperwork. I'd grown stronger in the silence. He still thought I was the same person who'd shrink when challenged. He didn't realize. I was no longer playing defense. I was building an offense. And the moment he tried to interfere, I'd be ready. Because the thing about rebuilding is, it's not loud. It's quiet. Intentional. Relentless. And eventually, unstoppable. I didn't set out to get revenge. Not at first. For weeks after I started rebuilding my business and recentering myself, all I wanted was peace. Silence. A life where my name wasn't dragged into lies, where my accomplishments weren't used as punchlines, and where I could wake up each day knowing no one could take credit for what I'd built. But sometimes, especially when you've been used and discarded for years, peace can only come after justice. And justice doesn't show up by accident. It started with the credit fraud. I hadn't forgotten about that. Mason using my name and old address to slap my identity on Dad's hospital bills. I'd already filed a report with my bank and was working with them to investigate the charge. But I needed more. Something that wouldn't just reverse the charge but prove, without question, what he did. That's when I remembered something. A year ago, when I was living at that old address, before Mason moved in, I installed a small security camera above the door. It wasn't some high-end system, just a basic motion-activated camera that uploaded footage to a cloud account I hadn't touched in months. I'd installed it after someone stole a package, but when I moved out, I forgot to take it down. It wasn't connected to Wi-Fi anymore, but I remembered that it had an SD card. And I knew Mason. I knew he didn't notice things that weren't about him. Odds were, that camera was still there, dead and dusty, but still holding data. The next morning, I drove by the old place. Parked across the street. Just watch for a while. Mason's truck was there, same vanity plate. M4 Son. Subtle as ever. No sign he was home. I waited until he left, probably off to the gym or to brag somewhere, and I made my move. The camera was still there, hidden in the porch light housing, exactly where I'd left it. I popped it open, yanked the SD card, and left. Fast. Back home, I dug out an old adapter and plugged the card into my laptop. Most of the footage was ancient, me grabbing takeout, the landlord fixing a leak, a raccoon doing unspeakable things to a trash can. But then I found the one. Dated 3 weeks ago. Timestamped 2 hours after Dad was admitted to the hospital. Mason, walking out the front door, wearing a hoodie and holding a clipboard, looking both ways before locking up and heading to his car. It didn't show him signing the form, but it placed him at the address tied to the fraudulent hospital charge. And most importantly, it proved I wasn't there. I saved the clip, backed it up 5 times, uploaded it to my Truth folder. Step 1, complete. Next, I reached out to Sarah. I hadn't told her much since the last time she messaged me about Mason's smear campaign, but I figured if anyone in the family would be open to hearing the truth, it'd be her. I sent her the video and asked, "Do you think anyone in the family would believe this matters?" She called me instantly. "Oh my God, Connor," she said. This proves he's lying." I explained everything. The charge, the signature, the voicemail, Mason's text, and the video footage. Her voice was low and shaky. "I knew he was bad," she whispered. "But this is next level. This is criminal." That word hung in the air. Criminal. It wasn't just family drama anymore. It was legal. Sarah didn't hesitate. "You need to do something with this. Expose him. Go public. Tell the family. Call the cops. Whatever it takes." I wasn't ready to go full nuclear yet. Not until I had everything lined up. But I told her I had a plan. And I did. Because Mason's greatest weapon was narrative. He controlled the version of me people knew. The lazy brother. The bitter one. The jealous nobody. So before I could burn his bridge, I had to rebuild mine. I started with the truth. I wrote a letter. Not a rant. Not a revenge post. Just a letter. To every extended family member who'd been fed Mason's lies. Aunt Linda. Uncle Greg. Cousin Olivia. Even Grandma Rose. I told them everything. Calmly, clearly, factually. I included screenshots. Timelines. That camera footage. Proof of the forged signature and the fraudulent hospital charge. I explained how Mason used my name and framed it like I'd demanded inheritance money. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just laid out facts. Then I asked one simple question. If someone can lie this easily about their own brother, what else have they lied about? Sarah helped me send it. Some by email. Others printed and mailed. Then we waited. For a few days, nothing happened. Radio silence. I figured most of them had either ignored it or sided with Mason, like always. But then, Grandma Rose called. That might not seem like a big deal, but in our family, it was. Grandma Rose was the matriarch, the spine, the only person Dad still listened to. She'd never been warm toward me, more polite than loving, but she was sharp, observant. And until now, she'd always believed Mason's stories. Her voice on the phone was quiet, firm. "I read your letter, Connor." I didn't know what to say. "I believe you," she added. That nearly floored me. "I don't know what's happened to your brother," she continued. "But this isn't just immaturity. It's malicious, and I won't tolerate it." She didn't say much more, but it was enough. Enough to know that the tide was turning. Then came the others. Aunt Linda messaged me, saying she'd always suspected Mason had twisted tendencies, and that my letter just confirmed it. Uncle Greg texted, asking for copies of the hospital documents. Even Olivia, who used to call me Boring Connor, sent a DM that said, "Wow, I had no idea. I'm sorry I laughed at those jokes. I didn't know it was like this." I didn't need their pity, but I needed their eyes. And now, they were finally open. That's when I took the next step. I set up a private Zoom call. Not for drama, not to argue, but to let the truth be seen. I invited everyone who'd responded positively. I walked them through the evidence. Calmly, professionally, like a client pitch. I showed the video, the text messages, the invoice from the hospital. I even played the voicemail Mason left me, the one where he said, "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro." When the call ended, there was silence. Then Grandma Rose said, "This family deserves better." I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, I do too. Sarah called me after the call. You're scaring him, she said. I blinked. What? Mason, she explained. He's texting people, freaking out, saying you're trying to ruin his life, that you're obsessed with him. I nearly laughed. Of course he was playing the victim, but I wasn't done. Because Mason hadn't just lied. He'd committed fraud, and I had the proof. The police report was already in motion. I'd spoken to a detective, shared the documents, the footage, the timeline. They were investigating. I didn't know how far it would go, but I knew it wasn't going away. And that scared Mason more than anything. He tried to call me once. I let it ring. Then another message popped up. Please, don't do this. I stared at it for a long time. The irony wasn't lost on me. Please, don't do this. Like I hadn't spent my whole life begging for them to stop. But the real turning point came a week later, when Dad called. Not Mom. Not Sarah. Dad. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Connor, I don't know what's going on between you and Mason. Your mother says it's gotten out of hand. I'd appreciate a chance to talk. Face to face. I didn't call back. I showed up instead. Not out of obedience. Out of strength. Because I wanted him to see me. Not the version Mason painted. Not the quiet achiever. Not the scapegoat. Me. And as I pulled up to that house, his house, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the reckoning. And I had all the pieces in place. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that afternoon, I didn't feel nervous. That surprised me. For most of my life, this house had made my stomach knot before I even stepped out of the car. Today, there was nothing. No fear. No anger. Just a steady calm, like I'd already crossed some invisible line and there was no going back. Dad opened the door himself. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Older. The hospital scare had taken something out of him that pride couldn't fully mask. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered his voice at the dinner table. The way he'd said we'd all be better off without me. And the feeling passed. Connor, he said, clearing his throat. Come in. Mason was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. He stopped the moment he saw me. His face hardened, then shifted into something defensive, almost desperate. So this is it, he snapped. You gonna parade your little slideshow for Dad too? I didn't respond. I set my laptop bag down on the dining table and sat. Calmly. Deliberately. The way people do when they know they hold the upper hand. Mom hovered near the kitchen, eyes darting between us, hands wringing the edge of her sweater. She looked exhausted. Guilty. Like someone who'd waited too long to choose a side and realized too late that neutrality was a decision in itself. Dad gestured for Mason to sit. He didn't. Talk, Dad said to me. Explain why the family's being dragged into this. I nodded. Opened my laptop. Turned it so everyone could see. I will, I said. But first, I want to be very clear. I didn't drag the family into anything. Mason did. I'm just done covering for it. Mason scoffed. Unbelievable. You've always been dramatic. I clicked play. The security footage filled the screen. Mason, in a hoodie, stepping out of the old house with the clipboard. Timestamp visible. Address visible. Dad leaned forward. Mom covered her mouth. What is this? Dad asked slowly. This, I said, is Mason leaving the address tied to the hospital intake form. The same address used when my name and card were fraudulently attached to your medical bills. Mason laughed, sharp and forced. That doesn't prove anything. I clicked to the next file. The intake form. The signature. Enlarged side by side with my real one. Forgery, I said. Ask any handwriting analyst. Mason's laugh died. I played the voicemail next. Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. You're welcome. Silence swallowed the room. Mom sat down hard in a chair. Dad's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't, he started. I raised a hand. I'm not done. I showed them the text messages. The ones where Mason told people I'd demanded money. The screenshots Sarah had forwarded of family group chats where my name was dragged through the dirt while I stayed silent. The bank correspondence. The fraud report. The detective's email confirming the investigation. When I finally closed the laptop, the house felt different. Heavier. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dad looked at Mason. Not with pride. Not with indulgence. With disbelief. You used your brother's name, he said quietly. You committed fraud. Mason snapped. I was helping. You were in the hospital. Someone had to take care of it. Connor never does anything for this family. That was it. That was his last card. I stood up. I've spent my entire life doing things for this family. I said, voice steady. I just didn't do them loudly enough for you. I didn't lie, steal, or step on people to feel important. And you hated me for it. I turned to Dad. You taught him that, I said. Every time you laughed at his jokes about me. Every time you called my work a hobby. Every time you stayed silent while he tore me down. You didn't just pick a favorite. You created a monster and called it leadership. Dad didn't respond. He couldn't. Mom started crying. Quietly. The kind of crying that comes with realization, not shock. I didn't know, she whispered. I looked at her. You knew enough. Mason took a step toward me. You think you've won? He hissed. You think this makes you better? I met his eyes. No. It makes me free. 2 days later, the police came to the house. Not for me. For Mason. Fraud charges. Identity misuse. Falsifying documents. The detective was polite but firm. Mason tried to argue, tried to spin, tried to blame me. It didn't work. Evidence doesn't care about charm. The family fallout was immediate and brutal. Aunt Linda stopped answering Mason's calls. Uncle Greg demanded repayment for money Mason had borrowed years ago under false pretenses. Grandma Rose rewrote her will. Not dramatically. She just removed Mason as executor and reassigned responsibilities to a neutral third party. Dad didn't speak to Mason for weeks. When he finally did, it wasn't forgiveness he offered. It was disappointment. And that hurt Mason more than any punishment ever could. As for me, I walked away. Not in anger, not in silence, but with closure. I declined every attempt at reconciliation that came with conditions attached. I refused to be the glue that held together a structure built on lies. I kept my distance. I focused on my work. My channel grew. My business doubled. I moved into a new place. Bigger, brighter, entirely mine. One evening, months later, Dad called. He apologized. Not perfectly. Not completely. But genuinely. I accepted it without reopening the door. Mom sends occasional messages. They're careful now. Measured. Respectful. Mason? Last I heard, he's still telling people his brother ruined his life. Maybe he believes that. But here's the truth. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped letting myself be the family scapegoat. And when I finally walked away, I didn't take revenge with shouting or cruelty. I took it with the truth. And the funny thing about the truth? It doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard.